Mark Consuelos's health began to decline rapidly as doctors confirmed the devastating news of cancer. Kelly Ripa broke down in tears. They had first noticed the changes like a missing key, small, ordinary things that made them pause. Mark would forget a line, misplace his keys twice in one morning, or stop mid-sentence as if the thread of thought had suddenly snapped. At first, the family laughed it off. A busy schedule, the stress of work, the way life accelerates and scatters the maps in our pockets. But when Mark began losing more than time, when his appetite thinned to a few forkfuls and his evenings turned into long, heavy naps, the laughter faded, leaving behind longer shadows. The diagnosis arrived in its own strange language, clinical, blunt, and somehow more intimate than they expected. Tests ordered as a precaution revealed a progression of disease none of them had imagined. The word cancer sat on the table between Kelly and Mark like a hot plate, something that demanded gloves, care, and a slow tenderness to approach. This is a story about that week and the weeks that followed, blooming like bruises around it. The flicker of hospital lights, the collapse on a rainy afternoon, the media that tried to turn sorrow into a spectacle, and the quiet, stubborn rituals that kept a family from dissolving into headlines. When Mark was first hospitalized, the decision felt sudden, because fear doesn't respect calendars. One day you're discussing scripts and the dog's refusal to behave. The next, the walls of your home feel the wrong color for the mood you're carrying. The oncologist used the word aggressive and explained how the cancer had spread faster than they'd hoped. There was no melodrama in the clinic, only the careful cadence of people trained to deliver bad news without letting it twist into false certainty. Mark, for all his charm and the confidence he carried on camera, was human in the way television never required him to be. He received the news with a calm that could have been denial or rare steadiness. "Okay," he said, a small word that held worlds. Kelly watched him with the quiet fear of someone who loves deeply and knows how fragile the scaffolds of daily life can be. The family rallied with the clumsy precision of those who love fiercely. The children, Joaquin, Michael, and Lola, reorganized their lives with a discipline that made Kelly both proud and quietly terrified. Friends were called to help around the house. Michael balanced schoolwork with hospital visits. Lola made lists of questions for the doctors and pressed them into her mother's hand like talismans. Mark was first admitted to a general ward where the air smelled of antiseptic and the world shrunk into careful routines. Doctors discussed options, chemotherapy, targeted therapy, palliative considerations. They spoke of possible outcomes and treatments that might slow the disease. No one offered guarantees. Medicine was a map of probabilities, and the future remained uncertain. Kelly moved through the hospital like someone learning a new language. She asked questions with the tenacity of a person assembling instructions. She learned the faces of nurses, the rhythm of shift changes, the names of machines, and the meanings of lab results. The world had become a vocabulary test she could not afford to fail. Then came the press, like a rising tide. Photographers waited at the hospital gates. Commentators twisted updates into speculation. Social media overflowed with opinions and concern. Kelly found herself living in two rooms, one where Mark slept and another made of screens and headlines. A photograph of Kelly leaving the hospital, head bowed and mascara streaked, spread across platforms, a shorthand for anguish, fueling countless stories. The family tried to control the narrative with a brief, carefully worded statement: gratitude for concern, a request for privacy, and a promise to share updates when possible. But statements are thin armor, words thrown into a storm, hoping they hold.
Mark's condition worsened sharply. A fever spiked, his blood pressure dropped, and the quiet hum of monitors became alarms. Nurses moved swiftly, with practiced precision. When they wheeled him into the ICU, the family felt as though a tether had snapped, pulling them into a raging current. The ICU has its own geometry of fear: small rooms, glass partitions, and a rhythm that erases time. Machines trace every breath. Tubes draw maps across skin. Voices are steady, measured, surgical. Doctors explained that the initial diagnosis was complicated by infection and organ strain, a cascading effect that can surprise even experts. They said they were doing everything possible, that aggressive treatment could stabilize him, but again, no promises. Kelly's world shrank. She lived in orbit around the ICU bed, the glow of monitors casting halos, the scent of disinfectant constant. Her comfort became the smallest gestures: adjusting a blanket, smoothing a strand of hair, keeping one hand on his pulse while answering calls with the other. The children watched their parents like compass points, trying to find direction. Then, one afternoon, exhaustion caught up. Kelly stepped into the corridor to take a call, her list of tasks growing endless, until a dizzy wave rose and her legs gave way. The world tilted white. She collapsed to the linoleum, and for a brief moment, everything went silent. A nurse caught her arm and stayed by her side, murmuring reassurances. Fluids were given. The children were called. It wasn't the kind of collapse meant for an audience. It was the kind that comes when someone has spent every ounce of strength holding everyone else up. The next morning, photos of Kelly being assisted into an ambulance flooded news feeds. Some reacted with empathy. Others criticized, demanding statements. Social media doesn't allow the slow breathing of grief. It demands conclusions. The family's private pain became public theater. Headlines read, "Kelly Ripa collapsed in tears as Consuelos' health worsens." The words were technically accurate, but stripped of nuance, of exhaustion, of the real weight behind them. Inside the ICU, time was measured by blood draws and medication charts. Kelly tried to make sense of the schedules, learning how to be both the family's anchor and its public voice, a delicate balance on a thin wire. In the quiet hours, she wrote letters to tuck into Mark's clothes, recipes, funny memories, reminders to water the plants, small mementos that might one day feel like gifts. Doctors worked with steady urgency. They tried targeted therapies, antibiotics, consulted specialists, debated in hushed tones. Medicine is a negotiation between technology and humanity, and they were caught between both. Friends came in steady waves. Co-stars sat by his bed, reading lines, telling stories to fill the room with normalcy. Production teams cleared Kelly's schedule. Fans left flowers at the hospital gate. Strangers sent meals. These small kindnesses built a fragile scaffolding that kept the family standing when everything else felt like it might collapse. As the days passed, there were small mercies. Mark would open his eyes, smile faintly at a joke, or a machine's numbers would shift in a hopeful direction. The family treated these moments like holidays. The children celebrated quietly, a shared meal, a brief laugh. But the illness continued its unpredictable rhythm. Spikes of pain, bouts of fatigue, nights of waiting. Kelly learned how to make the small choices that mattered when the big ones didn't budge. Which flowers to accept, which questions to ask, when to rest, when to stay. Conversations stretched into the night, practical and heartbreaking, about wills, guardianship, unfinished projects, college plans. The paperwork felt both cold and necessary. They handled it with the calm efficiency of people preparing for the unimaginable. When Mark finally stabilized, it came with an unexpected quiet. The combination of antibiotics, fluids, and targeted therapy began to work. The fever broke. The monitors softened.